Thank you. It's fantastic to be here. Let me endorse what Heaton said, thanks to Emma in particular, and for great turnout, and for not forgetting me. And not forgetting that actually this area was one of the things that I was passionate about, and still am. So great to see so many people. I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I haven't got any slides, and I kind of guessed that you might be seeing those charts, and I thought you probably don't want to see them again. Some nods. But what I did think was, looking at the brief for today, I thought maybe what I'll do is just step back a bit in a few minutes and just remind ourselves why this matters. And I'm going to make just 2 points. And the first point is one that hasn't been mentioned so far. It's a global point. That what you've seen and heard so far is about the UK, or even about parts of the UK. But actually this year is a really big year globally for the statistical community, but actually for beyond the statistical community. Because later in the year, many of you will know that the member countries of the UN, that's about every country, or most countries in the world, almost every country in the world, are expected to agree a new set of sustainable development goals to replace the old expiring Millennium Development Goals. And it's really interesting that number 1 on the proposed set of sustainable development goals, I'll read it, is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Okay? It's great to see that our political leaders are so ambitious, but I'll say it again, to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. And that touches, I think, partly on the point, one of the points that Chris was making about a single measure will not do. And it won't do because it doesn't address the all its forms part, and it probably won't do because it won't address the everywhere point. So one of the, in framing this discussion, having your discussions today, one of the things that you might think about is comparability. Does it matter? The other thing you might think about is how well equipped is the UK to assess whether it's meeting its obligations under this new Sustainable Development Goal framework, if this is what's endorsed. Because one of the differences between the SDGs and the Millennium Development Goals is that the Millennium Development Goals were seen very much as an issue for developing countries. And again, I can, having checked on the UN website over the weekend, there are still 33 countries in the world who have insufficient data to be able to measure their own progress towards the Millennium Development Goals, which were agreed in the year 2000. So 15 years of activity and support, fantastic support from DFID and from the World Bank and from lots of other institutions trying to build statistical capacity in countries around the world. There are still 33 countries who can't measure the old goal. We've now got this, probably, have this new goal. And I know that around the world, in regions of the world, there are meetings just like this happening, with countries saying, how on earth are we going to be able to measure? How on earth are we going to be able to hold politicians to account on whether or not they are achieving this goal that they are establishing of ending poverty in all its forms everywhere? So, question for us, how are we going to do it? How is the UK going to do that? So that was my point 1. My second point is much more domestic, and it actually fits with some of the things that you've heard. This is an election year, in case you've missed it. It is an election year, and the macroeconomy, will feature heavily in that debate. We heard from Matthew about a balanced recovery that needs to be shared by all citizens. ONS has said that economic statistics will be a priority. Let's not forget that the macroeconomy is not the same as household living standards. And one of the things that we need to do, absolutely agree with Matthew, is to make sure that when we are talking about the recovery, that the economy is now roughly 7% bigger than it was 10 years ago. Our household incomes, just to use one measure, and household incomes at different points on the income distribution, are they 7 percentage points higher than they were 10 years ago? No. And making sure that in focusing on the economy, we don't forget that there is a microeconomic view of the world that must be maintained in our statistics and in our storytelling. So, it's a pity that the MP isn't here, because one of the points, and again I echo what Matthew said, is that those kinds of charts, plus charts that show the relationship between economic growth and poverty and deprivation in all its forms, should be something that candidates in this election, and those of us who are being asked to vote for those candidates, should have at the forefront. How many of them do? You all knew those charts. I wonder how many others do. So, they were my 2 points. I'm going to finish with 3 challenges, because I can do that now. The first is exactly the same as, again, Matthew made, maintaining and developing the sources that we have. And I agree too, the HBAI I hadn't looked at for a while, and I looked at it again over the weekend, and it is terrific. It's a real treasure and should be treasured. But it's not the only source, it's not the only set of analyses that need to be maintained. We developed 10 years ago, Survey of Wealth and Assets. Another really important part of the suite of data that we need if we're going to be able to really understand what's happening. The longitudinal studies, the ESRC and other funded studies are another important part of that. And some of it is quite hidden, but it needs to be seen and understood in its totality, so that when decisions are being made about priorities, the things that really matter are not somehow under the radar. The second point I'd make, which is one that was, I think, touched on, but one of the things that struck me in this day and age was that we need to improve timeliness. And that will be a challenge to both the GSS and to the academic sector. But actually, a lot of this is out of date, and a lot of it is changing fairly rapidly. We get kind of hints and clues at it from different sources. But a challenge to all of those who are producing data is, how can you improve the timeliness? And my final one is, again, echoing Matthew and perhaps leading into Mark. We need to improve the storytelling. I was struck, again, looking at Google poverty statistics in the UK. Google poverty statistics without the UK. There is a fantastic amount of data out there. The World Bank website, the UNDP website, here, Oxfam, JRF, various other organisations, campaigning organisations, HBAI you find. You don't actually find anywhere a really very compelling, very visual, very easily accessible and authoritative picture on what's happening in poverty and wider measures of deprivation. So one of the challenges, back to me it would have been if I'd still been in the job, so I give it to John now, is how do we improve, probably visually, the storytelling and the coherence of all this wonderful data that we have. Thank you.